This broadcast is inappropriate for all ages, right here on hashtag WeAreMovieClub. It's time for Scary Movie Squad. Salutations, I am Cameron, and I am conversation ready. I felt the cat. There's a cat in the bathroom. Okay, whatever. So Descent 2. So this is pre-recorded way after the fact of watching it. So bear with me. Was a little sick. Couldn't really do this. Still not feeling great. We're gonna give it a go. Conversation ready. Oh, Penny, we miss you. So the beginning of the movie, or the end of the last movie, I should say, since this is a sequel, was Sarah escaping the cave. Now she, according to whatever delusion she was having, because it really looked like she was just imagining it all. She crawled through like a feeding den, up a thing, crawled out of a hole in the side of a hill, fell down the mountain, and then sorry, got a cat right here distracting me. She managed to make it to the Jeep and then drove down the roadways, started screaming at herself, and then not Juno was in the passenger seat attacking her. So maybe she jumped out of the car, and that's kind of where this movie picks up. Not entirely sure, but there's a lorry driver, truck driver for those Americans, on the mountain road. He almost hits a deer, and then down his window goes a girl who I believe is Sarah. I could be wrong. It's been a minute, but I believe that's who it was. And then we reopen on a news report. Jesus Christ, cat. And apparently we're in... Oh yeah, that's the other thing. We're in Tennessee, too, so it's not like we're in England. There just happened to be... I think maybe Holly was Scottish. Oh God, my brain. So this Tennessee sheriff or whatever gets a call during this news report where they're all talking about the ladies from the first movie, how they went missing, and I'm not sure how they know they went missing, but the sheriff's asking for discretion because that's what this needs. And so at the hospital, the sheriff goes to see Sarah because at this point she's been recovered, but she doesn't remember anything. She's been heavily sedated, which could be part of the problem. Trauma plus the sedation could easily have kind of wiped it out of her memory. Obviously, she doesn't want to remember that. She had enough problems with the trauma from the previous year where her husband and child died. And so she spent a whole year there trying to deal with things, and that didn't work. So if that didn't work for that traumatic experience, for this new trauma that happens, of course, brain's going to go, deleted. God help you if you get that reference. So the deputy, who's a woman, tries to interview her because the sheriff's kind of a grumpy old fuck. Sarah gets triggered. She flips out a little bit. And then we, after they're dealing with that, we go to the mountain. Their search team has a search dog, and they send it into this old-timey miner's house shack thing. And the dog runs out scared, and we all know, as the audience, that he probably ran into some of the Wendigo. And, that's fine. It makes a lot of sense, actually. So they're all freaking out because the dog's freaking out, and but the point is that they find there's obviously a way in there. There might be something there. The sheriff asks for volunteers to investigate, and for whatever reason, there's a lot of this movie, horror movies are fueled by stupid. I'm sorry. It's just a fact of it. But there's just so much in this movie that doesn't make sense, and I'm happy to point it out throughout my notes. Again, this is the first one. They insist that this mentally hampered person go into a dangerous cave scenario where several people, including her, went missing. Now, this is all done from the perspective of, from the sheriff's perspective of being a cop in a small town. It's well, you're obviously the bad guy. I'm just going to prove that. Which is a fallacy. If you follow scientific theory, or like just criminal investigation in general, you look at the facts objectively and you piece it together. If you start with trying to prove someone's guilty, you can end up creating false evidence for it because you're too invested in one outcome over the other. So it's a bias thing. So where are we at? So they think they call it a chapel, which was weird, but like it's an entrance to a mine, is really what it comes down to. They bust the lock, they clear a bit of dust, and so they in the volunteers they have caving people, like kind of like Juno's crew, and Juno's famous too. So like that's part of the premise and why everyone's looking for her. And remember, it's Juno's fault the team went missing in the first place. So the sheriff's kind of, maybe he's got like a crush on her, but like he's down there to save Juno and whoever else, and prove that Sarah is the reason that they went missing. Like those are his agendas. That's it. He has no room outside of that. And he actually points it out to us a couple times. He gets to a couple points where he's just kind of like, well, how does this help us with this? And everyone's looking at him like, shut up. We got to get through this cave. Because he doesn't understand anything about caving. The deputy understands just the tiniest bit about caving, especially that the other guy's in charge. And that she doesn't know what she's doing. So that's something. So at this point, like, it becomes very clear that, like, Sarah's not turning back at this point. She is coming, and that was the intent from the beginning. And there's just no point in being down here, because she starts having flashes, and it's all, like, vague paranoia and concern. It's nothing solid that anybody could use that they wanted to use. It's just what it is. And it creates a lot of what I'm calling dead suspense. It's suspensefully moments, no payoff. Suspensefully moment, no payoff. So we've also got a claustrophobic deputy, a fat sheriff. No, he's not fat. He's just thick built, and it's just how it is. But the point is that thick built people don't fit through teeny tiny spaces you got to crawl through. So I was kind of hoping it would be more of a concern than it was actually ended up being in the movie, but it is what it is. So as Sarah's flipping out and looking in corners, she actually notices a Wendigo. I don't know what it's doing, because you think, like, if it was in the same cave as they were, that it would try to attack. Maybe it's acting as a scout. It's not an adult. Maybe it's weak, and it's waiting for them to split up. Maybe it went to go get a big brother. I don't know. But the point is that crazy Sarah seeing shit and whatnot. So it's just stupid. Oh man. So, and like, I watched the first movie a couple times. At the point where I'd watched this, I just watched the original movie the week before. And the sheriff's asking her stupid questions like, do you recognize this? And there are very few scenes from either movie that you can recognize. The latrine, which will come up later, is one of them. The feeding caves all look the same, so you can't tell which fucking one you're at. There's a broken bridge thing where they climb the ceiling. That's pretty memorable. And then there's like the crawl passages that collapse. Like, that's it. That's really it. And one of the things that makes the overhead pass, or the broken bridge room, memorable is that there's a dead woman hanging from it. Because in the first movie, she got killed there, and like no one moved the body. Like, a couple of the Wendigo probably went there and ate off of her, but no one's moving that. It's not happening. So I don't know why the fuck he's even asking. He's trying to be a cop in a cave, and he needs to shut his mouth. So I don't know what to call her, because I don't think I ever caught her name. But there's a girl on the listening device here. Here's the Wendigo clicking. like they're, for whatever reason, they're using audio recording equipment like that you would use for paranormal investigations, and so she hears like a clicking noise, and they're confused. Sarah obviously recognizes it but doesn't say anything because they already think she's crazy. And eventually they find Becca's body. Hopefully I got that right. That was the girl who liked, I don't know, the one that ended up hanging from the ceiling. They were kind of a pair in the first movie, and a rat crawls out her mouth, which almost makes it look like she was alive for a second. But my curiosity is how the rat got that far without getting eaten by a Wendigo. I'm just saying, like the Wendigo should have that entire area hunted clean. There should be no animals. They should be causing problems at farms, eating whatever livestock is there, plus pets at this point. So Sarah finally starts warning them they should leave. The sheriff wants answers because he doesn't. I honestly don't think he believed that she had amnesia, like at all. I think he thought she was just trying to cover her guilt, because again, bias. So why not? So he takes over watching her from the deputy because why be nice to her? Then Sarah flipped out. Then they go deeper instead of escaping, because why not? When you find people that were obviously killed, even if you're down there with the murderer, I just don't understand. Like, there's no good option to this. Get Sarah the fuck out of there. If you want to come back, fine. Leave the sheriff and her behind. No good. No use in this scenario. From their perspective. Now, we know as the audience, like, that she can survive and she knows what to do. She can be helpful, but that's not how she's being used. She's being treated as a burden, which makes her one. Let's see. Oh yeah, so when she flips out, she actually escapes, so the sheriff's actually chasing her, essentially. I think he's just following her. But he didn't like that she took the lead. My point, sorry. She turns out the lights, he does the same, and he's using a camera for night vision. I want to say they found the camera from the first movie by this point. No, they did not. I apologize. It's later. So, and then a Wendigo scares him, and his gun goes off. Because why wouldn't it? Oh yeah, because he headed out and ready to shoot Sarah. Because he can cover it up down in the cave just like she did, right? God, I hate that character so much. And that's where you can tell that the actor did a good job, or the character was written well enough. Because I like to invoke that reaction, a reaction like that emotion, like that means something was done well. So, and of course, this causes a big cave-in to have all that happen. And he was specifically told not to do that. They didn't want him to bring the gun, just as in case it went off accidentally. So there's, she's just in here as a cute girl because I have no idea who she is. I believe she's the team leader's girlfriend. But obviously she's just as capable as anybody else. I just didn't have any other distinguishing features. And she's not really. She actually gets damseled. I just realized that, but that's what I'm talking about. When the cave collapses, she gets trapped in a passage, and she thinks she's stuck. So she's just waiting to be rescued for a little while. Sheriff loses his gun. And it turns out there's a Wendigo investigating the girl who's trapped in the passage. So the rest of the survivors that are together, they find that feeding chamber. They find Holly's camera. They waste 2 flares on it. I thought I was going to end up counting materials that they wasted throughout the movie. Fortunately, this is like the one. But they're watching the video of them from the first movie when they first discover the Wendigo for real. And then, like, one shows up in almost the exact same spot. It's pretty funny. And they scatter. And I guess that's the hunting tactic for them. It's like, make a lot of noise, wait for the thing to run, and then chase the thing as it splits away from the pack. It's a predatory thing. It's why fish school, so that when they get attacked, they can scatter, and only one of them gets ate as opposed to everyone. But Sarah notices the Wendigo that it's hunting the deputy. So she jumps the deputy and covers her mouth so that the deputy's not making noise, because she knows better. But it hears the team leader like far away and runs off. But Sarah knows there's nothing to do for it. Just be thankful it's not eating them, essentially. But you would think that like they would follow it and help defend him, because then it would be like 3 against 1, maybe, or they could warn him, or they could distract it. I don't know. There's options, but they just kind of let it have him. Why not? So finally, girl in the passage is like investigating her situation, because she finally realizes that they can't get to her. So she reaches his arm out. There's some liquid that falls on her hand. She sniffs it for some reason, and starts making noise. The Wendigo eventually confirms that there is something there for him to eat, and starts trying to dig her out. She realizes that if she takes off her helmet, she can squeeze through a crack at the top, which I'm really surprised it requires her helmet coming off for that. And so she's just barely ahead of it as it's slipping under the rock. She's slipping out. It's such a ridiculous, like, it's like that moment of someone, or that trope or cliche of someone reaching for their keys underneath the car, but as a chase scene. It's so silly. And like it catches her by the ankle, and she kicks it, and it keeps pursuing her because it's hungry, and then she manages to drop the boulder on it, for a pretty graphic head splat. I was really surprised by that. But yay, human escaped. So let's see. So Sarah and the deputy finally have a conversation about what's happening. Sarah's kind of back to her survivalist Tomb Raider version of herself. So she explains that they track by noise, and that she seems to think they can follow the water out this time, which is not a tactic that anyone addressed in the first movie, even though they kept falling into water. They fell into water a couple of times. Let's say that. The sheriff finally finds the team leader's body, to no real point. But other than it's evidence that like things are, other than people are killing and eating people. So the girl from the passageway ends up finding the other guy who's just kind of there. It's literally in my notes as cute girl and useless guy, because they are just that not distinctive. But like they do a weird back-to-back thing, and climb up a chimney. That's what you call it. And to hide from the Wendigo, but the radio goes off because the sheriff is using the radio because he's a fucking idiot. Hate him so much. So they throw away the radio. And then she gets on the radio again because like it was like a loudspeaker box, essentially. So there's exposition about the team leader being dead. So she starts flipping out because that's her guy, right? So she hits somebody and then manages to calm down and goes back to survivalist mode. And they find Sam or Becca, who knows. So Sam was the one on the ceiling. So they find her. So there's finally a scene that you can no doubt recognize from the first movie. She's hanging from the ceiling, and they take way too long to try to use the dead body hanging from the ceiling to cross, because you honestly could do it. You could probably jump out there, swing off, or get to the other side pretty well. So a Wendigo jumps him, and then a female Wendigo jumps her, it jumps out onto the body to get her too. Like, so now they're like hanging off the dead body, circling and fighting. Mr. Wendigo bites him. He manages to drill it in the head, which I thought was impressive, even if it's a dying move. Getting a drill out and using it on him was impressive. She gets jumped by a Wendigo that rips her to bits off camera. So, I'm sorry. And then he jumps up and drags Mrs. Wendigo down. And then the third one shows up to kill her because she's freaking out about him and screaming because that's helpful. If I remember right from the first movie, that's water down there. So, Useless Guy definitely could have, come back with his, wound bandaged, maybe. If I remember right, he got bit, right here, though, so it's really dicey on that one. But it's possible. It's possible. But, when they fell, they did this weird, into darkness thing where they're just into a background and where they fade out. And Sarah and the deputy are going through these tight water caverns, so the deputy's really psyched about it, let me tell you. To the point where she stops moving forward from, air hole to air hole to make a goodbye video to her daughter, which, I get that you're concerned, but is that the time? I don't know. I guess the point is that you don't have another time past that. So, Sheriff... Okay, back to the sheriff. Why am I just saying sheriff? So, wherever the fuck the sheriff is, because who cares, right? Another Wendigo jumps him, and he punches it. He's the first one to actually just attack one of the Wendigos straight out. But he falls over. Juno ends up saving him, and she's totally messed up at this point. Not only is her, did she take the axe through the leg, or pickaxe, she's been in this cave for a few more days, so who knows what she's actually been eating. She's almost mute. She's blinded by this flashlight that he shoved in her face, and she to the point where she takes it from him and turns it off. But it's so dark down there that it doesn't matter that she can't see for a little bit because it's only slightly different. Oh man, this fucking movie is awesome. It's not as good as the first one, I'll give you that. But the way that they're balancing these multiple stories and still feeding them all together and keeping them kind of time synced, I really appreciate that balancing. And of course, Sarah and the deputy are in a tunnel, so they manage to get out of the water. But they have to crawl through these small crawl spaces, essentially. And then there's a Wendigo in the thing kind of following. And then a rat shows up. Sarah lets the rat go by because it'll distract the Wendigo. Maybe the Wendigo will stop and have lunch. But the deputy screams because she's an idiot. So the Wendigo starts chasing him through the crawl space. Sarah ducks down a hole. Wendigo blocks the deputy. Sarah uses a flare on it from up the hole. And then throws the deputy down the hole past her into a toilet. It's not obvious that's what it is, but just remembering it, it's pretty gross. Oh my god. And then jumps in herself. Oh, okay, I'm going to skip most of this. But the point is that they end up fighting it in a toilet. They have a real hard time with it. And then they actively question what they're standing in. And just in case anyone isn't clear, a Wendigo comes by and takes a dump. And you watch it happen. I want to slap whoever made that decision. Who decided that that's what you wanted to put in your movie? This is why I do these things. It's you spend millions of dollars, or at least hundreds of thousands of dollars on these movies. And those are the types of decisions you make? Oh my god. Okay, a little bit of water maybe, that'll help. Ugh. So the sheriff and Juno are together, and Juno finally makes it very apparent to the sheriff that he needs to shut his mouth, and that she's in charge, which she is, whether he likes it or not. So Sarah starts explaining the her and Juno thing to the deputy on that end, because of course they're going to eventually meet again. And it turns out Juno banged her husband. at one point, which I think was part of why they were upset before the car accident at the beginning of the first movie. So, like, there's a prequel where it's all drama shit where Juno's banging Sarah's husband. And then she tells the deputy that she legged Juno in the first movie. Well, she's not saying the movie, but that's the timeline. And then Sarah's using the camera to look around, and there's Juno. So now that they're all together, Sarah and Juno fight a little bit because, quite frankly, they have every reason to hate each other. The sheriff is a pro to Juno. Oh, he's pro Juno, sorry. He's a pro. I couldn't figure it out. My notes, sorry. So obviously the sheriff's on Juno's side. She's famous. Sarah is being blamed for offing the entire crew, apparently. When honestly Juno, I think, is responsible for 2 of the deaths, and Sarah's only responsible for the damages that she did to Juno. Yeah, it's really what it is. So Sarah refuses to follow Juno until the sheriff handcuffs her, because that's helpful in this scenario. Again, what the fuck? Idiot guy. They come to this crossing thing where they need to go one at a time. Brilliant part of the movie. It really is like a way to thin the herd, if you will. I'm just picturing it's like, okay, how do we kill these guys next? Like, they're just like this jigsaw meeting for the writing room. So they need to spread out their weight. But the sheriff insists that they still do it handcuffed. So of course things collapse. And the sheriff's hanging on just by the handcuff, and Sarah's hanging onto the rock. So, of course, being realistic, Juno, of all people, suggests they cut his hand off and fuck him anyways. And then the deputy has to be the one to do it for whatever reason. I don't know. I don't understand. But that also would mean, like, Sarah's wearing the bracelet for the rest of the movie. And of course, he's screaming his ass off because he's a moron. So that brings the Wendigo. They start eating the sheriff as they're hacking his hand off. I don't know like what to do with that bit. And they all fall into the dark. It's that same fade shot that I was talking about earlier. It's pretty bad. It looks pretty bad in the movies compared to all the practicals that they're doing with the caves and the Wendigo. So they eventually make it to the feeding chamber. This is kind of like the last leg of the movie here. Oh man. Some of them are eating wolves, which I'm surprised about. One drags in an elk. The team leader, who we thought was dead, has been laying there in the feeding room apparently for a while. He grabs them as they're leaving and makes a bunch of noise, so fuck that guy. So now they have to fight. It's almost like a video game. It's like, we're almost there. Final battle. And so they barely make it. Juno's heavily wounded, possibly dead. I still think if they made it... I'm sorry, they are making a third one. I still think she's going to be in the third one. And then maybe like it's going to be up on the surface. But the deputy goes... or turns to go, and there's like 4 more blocking. Sarah screams to call almost like 20 of them, and the deputy finally manages to run out. And once she gets outside, like, granted she waits till she gets outside, but then the idiot starts screaming like at the sky or whatever. So not only does everyone in the cave hear her, anyone who's on the surface hears her. And I just want to point out that they just dragged in like some wolves and an elk. So they're obviously hunting actively right now. So very easily could manage to be fighting on the surface. But she doesn't have any idea where she's at because she just crawled out of a hole in the ground. Like, I don't know how good your orientation is, but I'd be confused. She tries her phone, which was a good move. And then she gets shoveled in the face by the old farmer guy at the beginning of the movie. I think it's the guy who was driving the truck, actually, if I remember right. And he drags her back to the cave mouth. And then a Wendigo appears and supposedly drags her back down. So... It's a horrible fucking ending. Horrible fucking ending. I think it's an ending that begs for a sequel, so I'm looking forward to seeing The Descent 3. It should be coming out in 2019, if I remember from IMDb correctly. So, looking forward to that. What I'm expecting is that somehow, some way, Juno, Sarah, and the deputy all lose, right? Because the deputy's knocked out. Juno's down for the count. Sarah was fighting everyone, so either she managed to run everybody out of the feeding room, which will let Juno wake up, Juno and the deputy wake up, or Sarah will be knocked out too, and so they'll all kind of wake up together and be like, fuck, we're back deeper in the cave, how do we deal with this? So I'm really looking forward to see what they do with it. It'll be very interesting. It's a really good movie. So thank you for watching, listening, however you consume this. This has just been a little bit of Scary Movie Squad right here on hashtag WeAreMovieClub. If you see anything else we're up to, go ahead and click the annotations and they'll take you to your other channels. Thanks for watching.